Mm-hmm.
Hello and welcome to a conference championship edition of the pregame show. I, of course, am Adam Levitan. I am joined by a true member of Bills Mafia, Michael Leone, who is getting set for later today. I think will be one of the best games of the season. Mahomes versus Josh Allen, Bills versus Chiefs. First, we have Bucks versus Packers. Leone, how are you feeling? What are the plans for today?
I'm a little nervous. I've been grinding some MME sets to take my mind off things this morning, but plans are to just fine tune those MME contest entries once we get off here, and then try and be distracted by this Tampa Bay Green Bay game. I really wish the Bills game was first.
When will you be smashing natty ice cans against your forehead? What time does that come into play?
That's going to be, I'll probably make it until the game starts. So after the first big Bills offensive play is when we'll either that or when Tron Johnson gets a pick six for the second week in a row.
Okay. These games, I think, are really tight. You can see both the lines are around 3 right now. Both the totals are kind of close to each other, which surprised me. If I was projecting the total, I would say that at least a touchdown difference between Bills Chiefs, given passing rate for Bills and Chiefs versus what I think we're going to see from Packers and Bucks. I understand the Packers and Bucks have been throw heavy, but not at the same rate the other two have. Does it surprise you at all that the totals have kind of stayed somewhat close? I think it's like 54 and 50 or something like that right now.
Yeah, I'm looking up the DraftKings Sportsbook, 54.5 on the Bills Chiefs side.
Oh, and 53, yeah.
Up.
And it's 53 on the Packers now, yeah.
So they both come up, right, a little bit?
Yeah.
And I would think the Bills Chiefs would be higher. I wonder if people are maybe like over accounting for that game earlier in the year in Buffalo, where the Bills offense wasn't quite rolling yet. The weather wasn't great that game. The Bills also really enticed the Chiefs to run a ton that game. And I don't think that happens this week. I think we're going to see a ton of dropbacks. These are our top 2 teams in pass rate over expectation by a large margin. So I am surprised the gap in total isn't a little bit wider. I guess for Tampa Bay, Green Bay, what you could say is, well, Tampa Bay is actually pretty high up there in pass rate over expectation. Green Bay is a really efficient offense against the Tampa Bay defense that, not GTO, but they encourage teams to pass a little bit more than run. So that could push the Packers to pass a little bit more. So you can see where that runs up too. So we got some really exciting games and some really good quarterback play.
All right. In terms of 2-game slate play, certainly one of my least favorite formats to play because no matter what angle you think you have, well, a lot of other people are going to be on it. And you essentially, even though we can talk about macro stuff and correlation, all this stuff, honestly, what you're going to need, even in smaller field stuff, you're going to basically have to run into the perfect team. Like if Equanimous St. Brown catches a long touchdown, you're going to have him to win anything. And that kind of is not a great feeling knowing going into a slate, you're going to need to hit perfect because let's be honest, on a 2-game slate, somebody, whether they're being thoughtful or not, somebody's going to run into some combo of something near perfect. So certainly not my favorite type of slate is the 2-game. Do you have any general thoughts for the people on playing 2-game slates, Leone?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. One thing Drew and I always point out on our show, it seems like a little thing, but don't overthink your defense. You can use the defense in a shootout game. It's going to be so random, especially in this slate. None of the defense project well. And don't be afraid to onslaught. Sometimes I think if people are hand building, they're going to try and get the perfect play from each of the teams, each of the 4 teams. And, you can go 4 skill players on the same team and go really heavy one game and hope one game kind of duds out. So I would say don't be afraid to do that. But yeah, it's hard not to overthink these 2-game slate because you're trying to just be so perfect. And what's weird is it almost ends up a little bit more random because on a main slate, you need 1 out of the 15 games on a main slate to really pop off, right? For that stack to hit and to win. And then the correlation is going to matter a lot. In a 2-game slate, 2 games could both dud and someone still has to win. There still has to be a winning lineup. So if they both dud out a little bit offensively, then you might end up throwing the correlation out the window somewhat.
Yep, exactly. All right, let's get to some of this news that came in overnight. First piece of news that came in overnight was Sammy Watkins. Still listed questionable, but it sounds like Chiefs are not optimistic. We're projecting him out right now. And we have a big sample of this, obviously, because Sammy Watkins has not played very much this year, didn't play last week. Obviously, talk to the people about how we are projecting behind Tyreek Hill now with Sammy out.
Yeah, so you can see we've got Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman, Pringle in there. We have, in terms of straight projection, we have Hardman slightly ahead of Demarcus Robinson. And if we look at the usage last week, it seemed like it was a lot heavier Hardman than we expected, but really him and Robinson played about the same amount of snaps. Hardman had one more target and he had a carry on the ground. So I do think people might overplay Hardman a little bit. They already played Hardman like 2x Robinson last week, and we've seen Robinson at times get a lot more run. Hardman, obviously, the more explosive player, the more fun player. But if you're looking for small edges in MME, I think being overweight Demarcus Robinson makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to play D-Rob over Mecole just from a straight up standpoint, because I think even though D-Rob's going to play more, like stuff is schemed to Mecole more. But I hear you. I mean, you know, DeMarcus always goes under own relative to his role, or relative at least to his playing time. You know, he's going to run a lot of wind sprints, but yeah. Okay. Other injury news: Clyde Edwards-Helaire is in. Le'Veon Bell is out. And I think one of the biggest things on the slate is, how do you think Kansas City's going to play their running backs? I'll give my take first. I think that what we'll see is Darrell start the game and have a chance to be the 1A kind of 60-40 on early downs over CEH. But much like the Leonard Fournette versus Ronald Jones thing, Ronald Jones is drawing dead to the pass game role. And I think CEH, for a lot of reasons, is probably unlikely to have the pass game role too. And so I think that Darrell will be the guy if they get into a 2-minute, 4-minute, if they get into 3rd and 12s and stuff like that. I think it'll be more Darrell than CEH. And I think Darrell is like 50-50 with CEH on early downs. So I mean, I can't say for sure. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has missed a lot of time. And when he was in there, they didn't trust him too much on pass protection. One of Clyde Edwards-Helaire's best games this season was against the Bills, when they essentially dared the Chiefs to run the football. Clyde Edwards-Helaire ran for 156 yards or something insane. Obviously, CEH has a chance to come in and get hot because he's just so much better runner than Darrell Williams. So if that happens, I could see CEH soaking up way more than we have projected here. It's just hard from a median projection standpoint. I wouldn't be opposed to playing both of them in some contrarian lineups. I don't know how you feel about that, but the more plus EV scenario is probably just to pick which one you think has the chance to have the higher ceiling and go with that one. But how are you thinking about the Chiefs running backs?
Yeah, I don't have too much of a take as to who I think it is. I really, quite frankly, don't have a strong opinion, much conviction there. So I'm telling you a little bit on the Darrell thing. And plus, sometimes in these situations, it makes sense to just go the opposite way of the market. We don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty. And outside of us, a lot of the other projection systems around the industry, they're projecting Edwards-Helaire meaningfully ahead of Darrell Williams. And if we get into a situation where, right now we're projecting CEH for a little bit more ownership than Darrell, if I were to guess, I'd say we're more likely to miss in that gap being wider than smaller. Yeah. And if CEH ends up 2x Darrell, I'll take my chances on Darrell in MME and be overweight him. Not that I'll play no CEH, but I'd rather be overweight Darrell than CEH and just play the opposite of the market. And you know what? If the market's right, they're right. But if I end up being right and we end up being right on Darrell, it's going to be a lot more meaningful in an MME set. And then even in small field, Darrell could be really, really low owned for a 2-game slate, which seems, crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely playing Darrell in some small field. I think Ronald Jones and Darrell would be the two guys. If you're looking to pivot off Devin Singletary, Ronald Jones and Darrell will be the two guys that I like best. Obviously, Lenny is going to be super owned, and Aaron Jones and CEH and Singletary are going to be super owned as well. Okay. Gabe Davis news. Gabe Davis, there's no new news, but we are currently projecting him out. I think it's interesting they called up Kenny Stills from the practice squad. You're the Bills guy. It doesn't sound like you believe that they will slot Isaiah McKenzie into the Gabriel Davis role. How do you think the Bills play it without Gabriel?
Yeah, I don't think so. I hesitate to get too football guy because there's a lot of guesswork, but I wouldn't be surprised if Stills is actually out there, out wide in some of the, the Gabriel Davis role. McKenzie is not an outside receiver. So a lot of the stuff they do with Gabriel Davis, I don't think they're going to do with McKenzie. McKenzie's more kind of like the gadget play guy and then the backup to Cole Beasley in the slot. And he's going to see the field some, might be an MME sprinkle type guy. But even though you don't see Stills on the page here, he's not on the page because he's not available on either DraftKings or FanDuel. But we have him for about the same amount of work as McKenzie. And then I do think there's a chance that the Bills played a lot of 4 wide last week. I think we could see more 3 wide with Dawson Knox getting more playing time. And he's kind of interesting. If you're playing the Josh Allen, like over the course of the season, Allen and Knox are really heavily correlated because those are big touchdown days for Allen, and he spreads it out. And Knox is never going to get there on volume. He's only going to get there on TDs. But he makes sense as a low-owned tight end for me, especially with a ton of ownership probably being on Kelsey and Tunyon at tight end.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I might be a little bit more optimistic than you on McKenzie, thinking that they can go 4 wide with John Brown and Diggs on the outside and McKenzie and Beasley in double slots. You know what I mean in that formation, and so get all 4 of them out there as well. I don't know how they feel about Kenny Stills. He hasn't been with the team for what? What's he been with the team for? Maybe like practicing for like a month or something like that.
Yeah, about a month.
Yeah. Okay. Last bit of news, obviously, Antonio Brown is out. We've been thinking about the Scotty Miller versus Tyler Johnson thing a lot. I think that if I had to play one, I'm not playing either on DraftKings, I don't think, because, A, I'm only making a couple lineups, and B, because the pricing, the way that they've deflated all the wide receiver pricing on DraftKings, I just can't stomach Scotty Miller at 3,400 when I can get, John Brown or Cole Beasley for 4,100 or John Brown for 4,300. They're just priced too closely, and Godwin is obviously extremely underpriced, as is Diggs and Tyreek and Adams. So, if you're playing larger field stuff, though, I do think that Scotty is probably better than Tyler, but we're really just guessing here. Any final takes on Scotty versus Tyler?
Not really. I mean, Scotty seems like he's the guy that, one, I think it's more likely he plays a more prominent role, but even if we're wrong, he's been seeing those downfield targets from time to time, so I think it's more likely he hits a really big play than Tyler. But I do think they're both solid, decent receivers on a team that's going to pass happily. So don't mind the MME sprinkles if you have a strong take there. In general, I agree with you, though. I think part of this slate, not just on the Tampa Bay stuff specifically overall, is the wide receivers, Adams, Hill, Diggs, coming in at the same price or cheaper than Kelsey and projecting a little bit better than Kelsey overall. And then if you look at kind of the pivots, from Kelsey down, you're saving almost $500 no matter who you go to off Kelsey. So it's a really weird dynamic where Kelsey has this huge positional edge in terms of raw scoring, but I think in terms of actual construction and where his ownership being so heavily, I lean toward just playing the top 3 receivers at a higher rate than Kelsey.
Yeah. I think that the ownership, I'm not going to change it now because it's too close to lock, but I think that the ownership on Kelsey is probably going to come in lower than what we have here. I wanted it to be around 75, 80, and I think that it's more likely to come in probably around 60, because if you're running MME, if you're running through projection systems, you're not getting Kelsey because of the reasons that Leone said. The wide receivers have been docked so much in price on DraftKings that you're not going to get nearly as much Kelsey. And so I think Tunyon will be a little bit more owned than we have here, and Kelsey will be a little bit less owned. But yeah, I mean, I have nothing bad to say about Kelsey at all. Certainly, if you guys listen to the solo pod, I talked about the Mahomes doubles. I think are very, very, very much in play, even though I think turf toe is at least something to be aware of on Mahomes. He really may not be 100%. I'm not sure how much that matters, but turf toe is not great.
I was stunned last week when you went through, I think on the solo pod, you mentioned that Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey, even though they are all pretty mega chalk, played together was only about 3% of lineups in MME. Now, 2-gamer, obviously that's going to change a little bit, but I could still, with Adams and Diggs there, you could still see a scenario where the 3 of them together are played less than they should be. And at least this year, the correlation between Kelsey and Diggs has been more positive than in the past. It seems like when they've gotten those game scripts, both guys have been getting there. I hate to look at the individual player correlation over too small of a sample, because going into the year it was the exact opposite, but they're fine. The 3 of them together could go under owned, even if individually they're all owned correctly.
Yeah, you meant Kelsey and Tyreek have been correlating well together, not Kelsey and Diggs. But yeah, I mean, Diggs is obviously part of that correlation too. And honestly, they've underpriced Diggs so much you can fit it. I mean, if you wanted to. But yeah, I also think that the other Bills wide receivers are underpriced also in John Brown and in Cole Beasley, specifically on DraftKings, where full PPR and Josh Allen's going to drop back so many times in this game. I think on FanDuel, it's a little bit a different story where you're more touchdown hunting, and also they didn't deflate the wide receiver pricing like they did as drastically on DraftKings. You still get Devontae Adams up at 8,900 and Steph Diggs 83 and Tyreek 84. So on FanDuel, I haven't run anything on FanDuel, but I would guess that Kelsey makes it into more lineups on FanDuel than on DraftKings, although I'm not sure about that. Any idea?
What was that? Sorry, I was
on FanDuel. If Kelsey's making it into optimals because they haven't decreased the pricing as much.
Yeah, I think
on wide receivers.
Right. I think I don't know. He's still priced like the same as those guys though. And you get, I think what the difference is, like, if you look at Tunyon's price versus John Brown, for example, Brown's the same price as Tunyon, whereas he's a little bit more pricey on DraftKings than Tunyon. And, I guess the gap in pricing is a little bit different. You don't save as much dropping from Kelsey to Tunyon on FanDuel as you do on DraftKings, and as a result, that helps Kelsey get into lineups a bit more.
Yeah, I was going to say we should go over some contrarian ideas and from a micro level, but on this 2-game slate, I really don't even have any. I think Rojo and Darryl are interesting. I think some of the tight end punts are interesting, i.e. Brait or Gronk. And guys like that, but I'm not overly excited about the Scotty Miller, about the I think McCole Hardman will be owned. I think the D-Rob one is interesting, but I don't think I'm going to play D-Rob. It's like there's not that many places to go. So yeah. Any ideas for the people?
I would just, attack the uncertain situations, play a little bit different than the market. Doesn't mean you have to, and you mentioned Rojo as one of them, maybe be overweight Rojo and underweight Fournette. You don't have to go a full fade or super heavy Rojo, but if you played them both at 30% ownership, for example, you're naturally going to be overweight one and underweight the other. And for a 2-gamer, we do have a lot of somewhat uncertain situations between the Tampa Bay ancillary pass catchers, the running backs for Tampa Bay, the running backs for KC. It's just there's a situation that occurs or plays out today where those guys almost don't even end up mattering, though. I think it's the hard part.
Yeah. If you guys have any questions, you can tweet them to @EstablishTheRun, or maybe you can throw them and Leone can put them up through YouTube. I'm not sure about
I can
that.
Put them up if I see them.
Yeah, you guys can send some questions if you want to @EstablishTheRun. Don't send them to me or Leone. Send them to @EstablishTheRun on Twitter from Jackie Young, Gronk, or Brait. Yeah, so they've each seen 19 targets over the last 5 weeks. Before last week, Brait had ran more routes than Gronk in 4 consecutive games. Last week, Gronk ran a couple more. I think straight up, I would still go with Gronk for red zone equity, but man, it's super close. And I kind of think if you're playing like casual, low stakes stuff, I mean, nobody's clicking Brait, and people love to click Gronk because they want to drink natty ices with him and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting. The Brait stuff at least is interesting. What do you think about Gronk versus Brait?
It's somewhat of a coin flip for me. I feel the exact same as you. I like Gronk a little bit more based on feel, but it's been dead even in targets the last 5 games. Brait's gotten more production the last 2 games, and it's a lot. I'd like to say play Gronk because people play the Brait recency bias, but like you said, it's all field. People aren't clicking Brait, so you don't really have that. So it's a coin flip for me. We're also getting questions about defense. Not going to answer. Just play whatever defense you want. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, I think. Well, I do think that the Chiefs. If I had to take one, and I think Josh Allen, the Bills are going to play well today, but just from how many times Josh Allen's going to drop back, combined with, Josh Allen has some games where he turns it over, is too aggressive, makes wild plays. I don't know. Considering how many times he's going to drop back, I think Chiefs defense would be my favorite. But I know that's how it's projected also.
Yeah, it's based on sheer dropbacks, like you said. It's just more opportunities to get, the stuff that matters. And no team's going to project well defensively on points allowed because the totals, the team totals are pretty high and pretty even in both games.
Right. Okay, from Andy Cole on Twitter, chances TJ Yeldon sees more work and becomes GPP viable. They didn't seem to have much interest in using TJ Yeldon until very late in that game last week. He is their bigger back, though. We've seen them use Frank Gore at the goal line. We've seen them use Zach Moss at the goal line before. So I don't hate the idea of in your really large field stuff. What do you think about Yeldon?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more merit to just because of how pass happy these teams are. It's kind of the opposite on a lot of slates, but there's almost more merit to getting weird at running back because the running back scores might be pretty low on this slate. So, even with an egregious Yeldon projection, I actually get, a couple percent of him in the large field tournaments where I'm trying not to be duplicated and whatnot. And like I get almost as much as him as I do, a receiver that projects for twice as much. That is kind of on the ancillary because there's just so many good receiver plays. It's more likely that a weird running back finds his way into the optimal because we could see the running back scoring, cap at like 16 on the slate. We've got some split situations, but it's still, I think the usage we saw last week is probably what we see this week. We'll see if he gets a goal line carry or not.
Yep. By the way, if you guys are watching on YouTube, we'd appreciate if you hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell. Helps us a lot when we are trying to grow the YouTube channel and keep finding ways to keep bringing you guys this free content. Also, during the off season, we will have a ton of free content on YouTube, on the podcast, etc., as we get set for best ball, the draft, free agency, all that.
Someone asks, is quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end construction viable on this slate? Yeah, you can absolutely pull out the onslaught. Adam, I think you mentioned you were looking at a Casey onslaught in one of your small field tournaments. And again, a lot of this, comes back to the running back projections on this slate. We don't have a running back projected for more than 16 points. And Aaron Jones is somewhat expensive. Everyone else is 13 points or less. So if Darrell or CEH in a Mahomes onslaught gets to double digits just because the offense is rolling, they score once, or maybe they don't even score. They just get there on a few catches and 60 total yards. Like that could be enough. So I really wouldn't overthink that type of construction. I think it's super viable.
A few questions on Twitter from Shane and from Jacob are relating to Davante Adams versus Travis Kelce. And like, this is going to be the question of the slate, I think, is going to come down to a lot of this kind of stuff. Which of the high price guys do you play? You can't play them all. In terms of Adams versus Kelce, I am on Davante Adams over Travis Kelce, but certainly don't feel overly strong about it. I think that both of them have just an outrageous inside the 5 role. Like, in other words, when both their teams get inside the 5, it's like their target share down there is so ridiculous. Obviously, we do have Davante Adams almost 4 points ahead of Travis Kelce, which sounds like a lot to me, but why don't you tell the people how we're getting to almost 4 points Davante ahead of Kelce?
The target share for one is just massive for Davante Adams. So we're expecting more targets, even though Casey's super pass heavy. When you split between Tyreek Hill and Kelce as alphas, they get about 25% each, whereas you get 30+% for Davante Adams. And you mentioned the goal line roll is good for both of them, but Adams, what was your stat you saw that you tweeted out, Levitan, about? I think it was as many inside the 10 targets since Randy Moss, and he did it in 2 less games. Or he since Randy Moss's, I think it was like 2002, he had the most targets inside the 10-yard line. I mean, he's a running back in the goal line area. It's insane. So that's why we're getting him there. And I do think too, if you're playing in tournaments, I have a tough time clicking Kelce in the flex over one of these wide receivers because we're projecting the wide receiver better. And I think at worst, the ownership's about the same. Maybe Kelsey's even higher owned. So to me, it's like play the receiver who projects better and for less ownership. Not to say that you shouldn't play Kelce at all, but I don't love the double tight end lineups with Kelce because I kind of like the receiver better unless it's a Mahomes triple. And you can also tweak this stuff. Obviously, you can't late swap Davante Adams to Kelce, but you can kind of decide what you want to do between Kelce, Diggs, and Hill in your flex, depending on how early games go.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, from a normal, just zoom out, the distributions for wide receivers are going to be higher than tight ends. I understand Travis Kelce is a massive outlier, but his ADOT still isn't the same as Diggs and Tyreek Hill. Davante Adams has a low ADOT, but yeah, I think you find a bigger ceiling.
Here's a question about Jamal Williams. Is he more likely in positive or negative game script? So I'm curious, Adam, your thoughts, not just on that question specifically, but we were disappointed last week that they didn't unleash Aaron Jones. It was just same usage we saw in the regular season. Do you still think there's some equity that they could unleash Aaron Jones, or is that just a pipe dream?
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't believe what they did last week. I couldn't believe that not only did they involve Jamal Williams, but then they also had to get, like, it's very important we get AJ Dillon a couple of carries here. Like, I couldn't believe that they did that. I think that in scripts where they get behind or it's closer, I think it's way more Aaron Jones, like YOLO, season's almost over. Let's get Aaron Jones in there. I think, people were saying Jamal Williams got all the red zone, all the inside the 10 work. Yeah, that's true. But that was just like the drive he happened to be in on. I don't think they were like, let's take Aaron Jones off the field so that Jamal Williams can be our goal line back. I think it was just, hey, this was Jamal Williams' drive and we happened to get a few carries inside the 10. And that's what happened. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm not playing any Jamal, but it's not a great situation.
Yeah, I 100% agree on your take on the goal line role. I think people who are, again, not that you can't play Jamal, but I would not jump on the fact that he had goal line touches in one game as like, oh, he supplanted Aaron Jones. I think it was just random based on how the drives went, like you said. Another guy points out the tight end and flex stuff. It also comes down to the fact that if you're using Kelsey and flex, that means you're playing, a cheap tight end over John Brown and Beasley. I think that's a good point. And also, we've been talking in Slack. This is a tough decision between Brown and Beasley, where Beasley in a game where the Bills could throw so much. I see scenarios like the Cardinals game earlier in the year where he just gets peppered with targets, but he obviously has more health concern than Brown. And we saw that last week with, what if they alternated goose eggs? We got a Brown goose egg week 1, a Beasley goose egg week 2, or at least a bad game last week.
So the reason that the ownership is like this, I think it will be like this, is because people don't want to click Cole Beasley off of an air ball. But I will say Cole Beasley practiced full on Friday and was not on the final injury report at all. So, I think Cole Beasley is as healthy as he's going to be. That said, Michael Thomas last week was not on injury report at all, played full, clearly wasn't 100%. So, yeah, I feel more comfortable with John Brown, but in tournaments, I feel better about Cole Beasley. Yeah, Eric Z is on it. Okay. We have some things to clean up before lock. You have some things to clean up before lock. Anything you want to say, Leone, before we sign off here for this 2-game slate?
I'll flag plant Cole Beasley. People want to flag plant. Give me Cole Beasley. I think he gets hit with a lot of targets, and I think people will be too scared by the injury stuff. Wasn't listed on the final injury report. Not that that matters too much, as we saw last week with Michael Thomas, but it makes you feel a little bit better about him this week versus his health last week.
Man, I feel like this is kind of the chalk. I was going to say McCole Hardman, but that's so, we've tried it too many times with McCole Hardman to flag McCole Hardman. I'll stick to my brand, Penn State's own Chris Godwin, the best matchup out of the Bucs wide receivers, no Antonio Brown, and a game where I think that the Packers at least have a pretty good chance to get out to a lead here and force Tom Brady into really throw heavy script. And so lineups that may not have Ronald Jones, I think makes sense with Chris Godwin, and lineups that include, some of the ancillary Packers guys. I think Lazard is okay. I think MVS is okay. I think Tanyan is okay. They can include Godwin as well. Obviously, we're talking about a 2-game slate. There's going to be tons of overlap anyways, and these mini correlations don't mean as much. But yeah, I'll go with Penn State's own Chris Godwin.
Nice.
All right. That is going to do it. Again, we'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe on the YouTube machine. We'll be back for plenty of free shows as the offseason comes to fruition. We'll probably do some Super Bowl stuff as well here on YouTube. Certainly we'll have all our normal content behind the paywall for subscribers on the Super Bowl as we get set. Leone, stay healthy tonight. I suggested to the guys that maybe we should take out a life insurance policy on Leone in case something happens, but we have not secured that life insurance policy. So do not die tonight. Enjoy the game.
Thank you. Go Bills.
For Leone, for producer Leone, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.